Women who gave the creep a chance. How did it go? After a few dates, he started to get way too serious. I told him calmly and honestly that I wasn't ready for a serious relationship, and he deserved to be with someone who was. He completely flipped shit, and after a bit of name calling, I stood up and started to leave the bar. He then said, "You should watch yourself in the future, especially when getting into your car." I was extremely paranoid for months after. Would check my back seat and under my vehicle. Never saw him again, so just an empty threat, but not a fun time. That was like 15 years ago. Yeah, he's still single. I bought him a coffee one time and we chatted about our music tastes. 3 days later, I was sitting in my dorm and I got a text from him that was just a selfie. I sent one back and the conversation got really boring, so I sent him a snap of a black screen. He responded, "Are you in a dark place?" And I said, "Yeah, lol." His response was, "Well, you'll have to leave soon because you have class in, insert building with insert professor, at 6 o'clock. I literally never told him anything about my classes, so he just fucking stalked me until he learned my entire schedule. It turns out he was a serial creep preying on freshman girls. My college had a database of student info that anyone could access, ostensibly for email addresses, but it also included full names, home addresses, and classes. And no one in admin thought it was a bad idea, somehow. At the end of a weird and terrible date, he asked me for a hug as I was turning to leave. I thought, whatever gets this over with. As I was pulling away, he forcibly grabbed the back of my head and shoved his tongue in my mouth before I was able to break free. The next morning I had a 3-page email in my inbox telling me all the things that are wrong with me and why he is not interested in a second date. What the fuck? This is so gross, I'm so sorry. God gave me teeth for a reason. I had a bad vibe, but my friend told me he was a good guy. So we went on a date, and he asked to drive my car. He curbed my rims and talked about how he was fired unfairly from his job. The next weekend I avoided his calls and instead went out to dinner with friends. While I was gone, he broke into my apartment. My neighbors and the cops were waiting outside when I got home. I spent the night at my mom's. He showed up at 0300 when I let him out and was trying to get in a window. Wonderful officer spent the rest of the night in the driveway. Fast forward a couple weeks and he shows up at my work, mopes over to me and hands me folded papers. It was 8 to 10 handwritten front and back notebook papers where he alternated between telling me I was the love of his life to why he hated me and wished I would die. I was terrified. Security escorted him away. Never saw him again, but found out later he did the same thing to some girl in Spokane, but he was able to actually get in, beat her, and landed her in the hospital. Edit. The friend was dating my best friend and the good guy was his cousin. I think he really wanted us to hit it off so the 4 of us could all hang out together or something. He was shocked by the actions of his cousin, but did tell me later that he had thought he changed. They're not longer dating and haven't talked to him in years and years. This happened 20 years ago in the PNW. This is why people shouldn't pressure others into shit they've got a bad feeling about. Hope your friend learned the lessons and I hope you're doing well. One of my favorite quotes from Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Why don't people trust their instincts? They sense something's wrong, someone's walking too close behind them, yet they don't cross the street. You never think the fear of offending could be stronger than the fear of pain, but you know what? It is. Intuition is a very powerful thing. Yes, it can often be wrong, but in evolutionary terms, it's there to keep you alive. Badly. He became very stalkerish, was very insecure about other men, and tried to isolate me from friends. The last 2 were how mine went. I no longer date people with self-esteem issues for this reason. If they believe themselves to be awful, their attitude usually becomes something like, "If she'll date me, she'll probably date anything with a pulse." And that's how a guy ends up jealous of your 60-year-old boss or a store cashier. On our first date, he told me he loved me and that he would let me pick out the color of our house. The rest of the evening was super awkward. I never talked to him again. Met him when I worked as a cashier in a small downtown shop. Wasn't my type and seemed a little off, but I was young and had 0 real dating experience. Agreed to grab coffee as a friend and made it clear I didn't have a romantic interest. He became convinced he was Gatsby and I was his Daisy. The Great Gatsby film had just come out that year. started stalking me and endlessly sending letters and gifts to me at work describing how we were fated to be together. When I confronted him to stop, he started having his friends follow me at work or drop by to check in on me. Prowled outside on nights I had to close shop alone. I ended up quitting that job and things fizzled. 7 months later I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the same dude. He just got released from a short prison sentence, and was letting me know he thought of me every day and was going to find me so we could finally be together. I made up a story that I was traveling abroad for college and would be gone indefinitely. Changed my number and luckily haven't heard from him again. If he'd actually watched the movie, he'd know that Daisy ends up married to another man and Gatsby ends up dead in a pool. Not exactly romance goals. He tried to kidnap my sister in an attempt to get me to get back together with him. I knew it was a mistake from the moment I said yes, and it was just downhill from there. And that strategy didn't work? Shocking. Sounds like you missed a really great guy. He stabbed my end table with a knife after getting upset with me, then started stalking me. I moved and invested in cameras for my house and a dash cam. 1 million emails, police reports, etc. Oh, and his twin brother raped and stalked girls a few years prior. Ended up killing 2 police officers. Seems like creep runs in the family. Edit, the twin brother murdered. Not my ex. Maybe would have been killed myself if I stuck around long enough. Also, my ex didn't start off as this psychopath, and I just so happened to like his crazy. He seemed like a misunderstood man, and his true self started showing after a few months into our relationship. Slowly at first, and then very quickly turned bad. He threatened suicide when I tried to break up with him, and he eventually started stalking me when I did end things. Don't date a creep. I sadly had to learn this lesson very young, that when someone suicide baits you, the best thing to do is call the non-emergency police line for a wellness check. Emergency if you really think they're capable, or on the verge. Usually that gets the message across that you won't fuck around. Happened to a few of my friends in high school, getting baited, not doing the baiting, and eventually we just learned to call their parents, or the cops. I walked in on him peeing in my washing machine after letting him in my home for some reason. This guy was handsome but way too into me for knowing nothing about me. It wasn't like when we spoke I was an open book or felt a strong connection that would lead me to want to share info with him. This was not a, I feel like I've known this man forever, connection. I just thought this was normal dating but had a gut feeling something was off. He talked to me like I'd been his girlfriend for months. We went on 3 dates, never even had sex. After 3rd date I had made my decision based on our short time getting to know one another, and let him know I had no interest in continuing to date, and that I didn't see us being compatible long term. He then locked me in his car, proceeded to ask if I wanted to move to California with him, what a fact, and started crying/begging me to work this out. I tried to be very nice, but it got to the point I was scared and wasn't sure how this was going to go since he was virtually a stranger, so I hit his dashboard and said if he didn't let me out of the car immediately I was calling the police. Then he threatened to kill himself if I didn't spend the night with him at his house. I'd never even been to this man's house. He finally let me out after like an hour or 2 but stayed in the parking lot of my apartment almost the entire night, and called me nonstop. About a month later he texted me out of the blue a really long paragraph apologizing profusely, and saying if I ever changed my mind to call him. I just said thanks for the apology, and wished him well. Hope he's doing okay, but I wanted no part of that. Wow, I had something similar happen when I was 18-ish. I was modeling at the time and volunteered for a date auction for charity, and some guy like 10 years older and I sorta knew than me, bought me. We went on our date a few weeks later, dinner and a mini golf or something, and the date was kinda awkward but fine, and afterwards I said, okay, that was nice. Time to take me home. Instead he drove me to his house and insisted I join him for a nightcap. I refused and he locked the doors and wouldn't let me out. This was in the days of pre-cell phones, so I couldn't even call 911. Eventually, after over an hour of him telling me how I owe him some more company 'cause he paid so much for me, I got nearly hysterical and told him that if he didn't take me home this instant I would kick his window out and scream for someone to call the cops. He did take me home and was all surly about it, and I couldn't get out of that car fast enough. Like you though, I didn't tell anyone. It was so messed up. I'm certain he was planning to roofie and rape me. It also sounds like he thought he was paying to have sex with you, but the money goes to charity. Getting auctioned off is creepy as it is, but that POS also felt entitled to you. What an awful situation all around. I've had men expect sex over paying for food. I stopped letting guys pay for dinner dates early on. But then I had a guy get surly because I wouldn't go home with him after he bought popcorn for me at the movies while out with a group of friends, so I extended it to all food, and just offering to pay for drinks. As in I said no to the drink, and he still came by at the end of the night, and was furious that I wouldn't go home with him because he'd offered. So knowing there are guys who don't understand that an $8 popcorn doesn't mean the woman is now obligated to fuck him, I'm not surprised that there's someone who'd be confused by paying a charity for a date, and then not getting laid. The entitlement out there is a real problem. The dude in the flat across from mine started off as a really nice guy. Introduced himself, offered meals when he'd cooked too much. Just a great guy all round. Within a few weeks, it was made clear that he was an alcoholic. I have a recovering brother, so I really sympathized with him. I went out of my way to sit with him, and eventually called him an ambulance when he fitted from Withdrawals, UK, so calling an ambulance is free. This carried on for a little while, with me sitting with him 2 or 3 times a week, waiting for an ambulance. One night after he started fitting, he kept grabbing my breasts. I was already on the phone to the ambulance service, but the woman heard me telling him to stop and sent police as well. He was carted off, and just like usual, I grabbed his keys and told him to knock for them the next morning. Well, the next time I looked after him, the groping got worse. And then slowly so did my life. Suddenly I had fires set outside my windows, and mutilated rat corpses left on my doorstep. The police were called after every incident, and I got to know one policeman who was put on my case really well. He suggested I put up cameras, so I did. There was footage of the neighbor standing outside in the yard at 3 a.m., just staring into my window, multiple nights in a row. Terrifying, but not illegal. Well, 2 weeks after that, my neighbor snapped. There were builders in the garden next to ours, and they apparently woke him up at 4 p.m. He ran out with a kitchen knife and stabbed 2 of the builders and the neighbor's dog. Everyone survived. He also slashed a whole bunch of tires on our street. When the police came to search the dude's flat, my policeman friend told me, off the books, that the neighbor had been faking being an alcoholic the entire time. He'd get in the ambulance, ride to the hospital, and then check himself out and walk home. Also, they found half a dozen decomposing rats in his bathtub they'd been mutilated. They later found a bloody hammer under his bed. You'd think him being arrested would be the end of it, but no. He put my name, picture, address, and telephone number on a prostitution site. I had men aggressively hounding me for sex multiple times an hour for 2 entire weeks before I just cut all ties and fled the city. Last I heard, he was in jail for the GBH, but that was a few years ago now. Yeah, never gonna make the same mistake again. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.